Smelled like fresh grass and pizza from the cafeteria. But for Jake Miller, that sunny day felt dark, like a big storm cloud was stuck right over his head. Jake was 13 years old. He was skinny, with messy brown hair that never stayed in place. His glasses were always sliding down his nose, and he had to push them up every few minutes. Jake wasn't loud like some kids. He wasn't popular either. Most of the time, kids didn't even notice him. That is, until he tried to talk. Jake had a stutter. Every time he opened his mouth, words got stuck. It was like trying to climb a huge, slippery mountain just to say a simple sentence. Sometimes he'd start a word and it would come out like hi or ww what. It wasn't his fault, he couldn't help it, but the kids at school, they didn't care. They saw his stutter and thought it was funny. They giggle or whisper behind his back. Some of them were meaner than that. One day, Jake was sitting in the cafeteria. He had a tray of food in front of him, pizza, an apple, and a carton of milk. He liked the cafeteria because it was loud and he could blend in. Nobody bothered him much when everyone was talking and eating. But that day was different. Tommy Baxter was there. Tommy was the king of 8th grade. He was tall, with spiky blonde hair and a loud voice that carried across the room. He always had a group of buddies following him around, laughing at everything he said. Tommy loved being the center of attention, and he loved picking on kids who weren't like him. Jake was minding his own business, taking a bite of his pizza when Tommy's voice cut through the noise. Jake, CC can't TT talk, Tommy shouted, copying Jake's stutter in a mean, mocking way. His buddies burst out laughing, slapping the table like it was the funniest thing they'd ever heard. Jake froze. His face turned hot and red. He stared down at his tray, his pizza suddenly looking blurry. The whole cafeteria seemed to spin. Kids at other tables started laughing too. Some pointed. Others whispered to their friends, their eyes locked on Jake. Tommy wasn't done. He stood up, making a big show of it. "Hey Jake, why don't you say something? Come on, tell us a story," he said, grinning wide. His friends howled with laughter. One of them, a kid named Ryan, added, "Yeah, Jake, what's up?" The noise got louder. Jake's hands shook. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to run out of the room and never come back. But he just sat there, quiet, his heart pounding like a drum. Inside, Jake felt something heavy. It wasn't just sadness. It was something bigger, something that burned in his chest. He didn't know what to call it yet, but it made him clench his fists under the table. He didn't look up. He didn't say a word. He just waited for the bell to ring so he could leave. But here's the thing nobody in that cafeteria knew. Jake wasn't just the quiet kid with a stutter. He wasn't just the boy who blushed and looked away. Deep down, Jake was hiding something big, something so surprising that it would make Tommy Baxter and his laughing buddies wish they'd never opened their mouths to make fun of him. Jake's secret wasn't something he talked about. He didn't tell his mom, who worked long hours at the diner. He didn't tell his teachers, who sometimes looked at him with sad eyes. He didn't even tell his best friend Sam, who was the only kid at school who didn't laugh at him. No, Jake kept his secret locked up tight, like a treasure chest buried deep underground. But it was there, waiting. And soon, everyone would find out what it was. That day in the cafeteria, as the bell finally rang, Jake grabbed his tray and stood up. Tommy was still laughing, high-fiving his friends. Jake walked past them, his head down, his glasses slipping again. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to, not yet, but as he left the cafeteria, something inside him felt different. That burning in his chest, it was growing. It was like a tiny spark turning into a fire. Jake's school wasn't huge. Maplewood Middle School had red brick walls and a big field out back where kids played soccer or tag. The hallways were always noisy, filled with kids talking and lockers slamming. Jake liked to stay out of the way. He'd hug the walls, keeping his backpack close, hoping nobody would notice him. But Tommy always did. Tommy had a way of finding Jake, like a shark sniffing out a fish. It wasn't just the cafeteria. It was the hallways, the gym, even the library, where Jake sometimes hid to read comic books. One time, Jake was walking to math class. He was late because he'd stayed behind to finish a drawing in art. The hallway was mostly empty, just a few kids rushing to their rooms. Jake was thinking about his drawing, a superhero he made up who could fly and punch through walls. He was smiling a little, lost in his thoughts, when Tommy's voice boomed behind him. "Hey, Jake, where you going so fast?" Tommy called out. Jake's stomach dropped. He turned around and saw Tommy with two of his buddies leaning against the lockers. They were grinning like they'd just found a new toy. Jake didn't say anything. He just pushed his glasses up and kept walking. But Tommy wasn't letting him go that easy. "Come on, man, talk to us," Tommy said, stepping in front of Jake. "What's the matter? Cat got your TT tongue?" His friends laughed, and one of them mimicked Jake's stutter, saying, "Hi-TT Tommy." Jake's face burned again. He tried to step around Tommy, but Tommy moved to block him. "Don't be rude, Jake," Tommy said, pretending to be hurt. "We just wanna chat." Jake's heart was racing. He wanted to say something, anything. He wanted to tell Tommy to leave him alone, but the words wouldn't come. They got stuck, like always. He opened his mouth, and all that came out was a quiet, "PP please." Tommy's eyes lit up. "PP please," he repeated, laughing. "Oh man, this is too good." His friends doubled over, holding their stomachs like it was the funniest joke in the world. Finally, a teacher poked her head out of a classroom. "Boys, get to class," she said sharply. Tommy raised his hands like he was innocent. "Just talking, Mrs. Carter," he said, smirking. He gave Jake one last look, a look that said, "This isn't over," and walked away with his friends, still chuckling. Now Jake stood there for a second, breathing hard. His fists were clenched so tight his nails dug into his palms. He wasn't mad at Tommy, not exactly. He was mad at himself. Why couldn't he talk like everyone else? Why couldn't he stand up to Tommy? Why did he always feel so small? But that wasn't the whole story. Jake wasn't just the kid who got picked on. He wasn't just the boy who couldn't talk right. There was more to him, way more. After school, when the other kids went home to play video games or ride their bikes, Jake went somewhere else. Somewhere nobody at school knew about. Somewhere he didn't need words to be strong. Every afternoon, Jake would sling his backpack over his shoulder and walk across town. He didn't take the bus. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He'd pass the diner where his mom worked, waving through the window if he saw her. He'd cut through the park where little kids played on swings and dogs chased balls. And then he'd reach an old building with a faded sign out front. It wasn't fancy. The paint was peeling and the windows were dusty, but to Jake it was special. Inside that building, Jake wasn't the kid with a stutter. He wasn't the boy Tommy laughed at. He was something else entirely. Something tough, something fearless. And every day he got a little closer to showing the world who he really was. What was Jake doing in that old building? What was his big secret? You're probably guessing right now, and I love that. Don't go anywhere because this story is about to get wild. Jake's got something up his sleeve, and when it comes out, it's gonna make everyone's jaw drop, especially Tommy Baxter. So what do you think Jake's hiding? Drop your guess in the comments and let's see who gets it right. Stick around because this is gonna blow your mind. Jake's days at Maplewood Middle School were like a song stuck on repeat. Every morning he'd wake up, eat his cereal, and walk to school with his backpack bouncing on his shoulders. He kept his head down, his eyes on the sidewalk, hoping nobody would notice him. He tried to talk as little as possible because talking was hard for Jake. His stutter made words feel like big rocks he had to push out of his mouth. But no matter how quiet he stayed, Tommy Baxter and his crew always found him. Tommy was the kind of kid who loved being loud and mean. He was tall, with spiky blonde hair and a laugh that sounded like a hyena. His friends followed him everywhere, giggling at his jokes and copying whatever he did. They called themselves a crew like they were pirates or something, but really they were just bullies. And Jake, he was their favorite target. In the hallways, Tommy would spot Jake and start mimicking his stutter. Hi JJ Jake, he'd say, making his voice all wobbly on purpose. His friends would crack up, slapping each other's backs like it was a big show. Jake would feel his face get hot. He'd push his glasses up his nose and try to walk faster, but the laughter followed him like a shadow. One day in gym class, things got worse. The teacher had everyone playing dodgeball. Jake wasn't great at sports, but he tried to stay in the game, running to the back of the court to avoid getting hit. Tommy saw him and grinned. "Watch this," he whispered to his buddy Ryan. Then he threw a ball hard right at Jake's legs. Jake jumped, but he wasn't fast enough. The ball smacked his shin and he tripped, landing on the gym floor with a thud. "Oops," Tommy said, pretending it was an accident. "Didn't mean to hit you, JJ Jake." The other kids laughed, even some who were Tommy's friends. The teacher blew her whistle and told everyone to keep playing, but Jake just sat there for a second, his knees stinging. He wanted to yell at Tommy. He wanted to say, "Stop it." But when he opened his mouth, the words got stuck like they always did. So he got up, brushed off his shorts, and kept playing, pretending it didn't hurt. But the worst day came after English class. Jake loved English because he could write stories. He didn't have to talk much, and his teacher, Mrs. Larson, always said his stories were good. That day, Jake had finished his homework, a story about a boy who finds a magic key. He was proud of it. He'd spent hours making sure every word was just right. But when class ended, he left his notebook on his desk for a second to grab his pencil from the floor. That's when Tommy swooped in. He snatched the notebook and held it up like a prize. "What's this, JJ Jake?" he said, flipping it open. Jake's heart sank. He reached for it, but Tommy danced back, waving the notebook in the air. "Let's see what the quiet kid wrote," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Kids gathered around, curious. Tommy cleared his throat like he was about to give a big speech. Then he started reading Jake's story out loud, but he did it in a mean way. He copied Jake's stutter, making every word sound slow and broken. "THTH the BB boy FF found a KK," Tommy read, dragging it out. His friends roared with laughter. Some other kids giggled too, though a few looked uncomfortable. Jake stood there frozen. His hands shook. His stomach felt like it was full of rocks. "Give it BB back," Jake tried to say, but his voice was quiet and the words stumbled. Tommy just laughed harder. "What's that, Jake? Can't hear you," he said. Then with a big grin, he tossed the notebook into a puddle outside the classroom door. The pages soaked up the water, turning all smeary. Jake's story, the one he'd worked so hard on, was ruined. Jake knelt down and picked up the notebook. His fingers were shaky and his glasses fogged up a little because his eyes were stinging. He wanted to shout. He wanted to tell Tommy he was a jerk. He wanted to say something so smart and strong that Tommy would shut up forever. But the words wouldn't come. They never did. So he just held the wet notebook and walked away, Tommy's laughter ringing in his ears. Inside Jake's chest, something was burning. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, something stronger. It was like a tiny fire that kept growing every time Tommy was mean. Jake didn't know what to do with that fire, but he knew it wasn't going away. It was patient, waiting for the right moment. What Tommy and his crew didn't know was that Jake wasn't like they thought. They saw him as the quiet kid, the one who couldn't talk right, the one who'd never fight back. They thought he spent his afternoons hiding in his room, maybe crying about how mean they were. But that wasn't true, not even close. Every day after school, when the bell rang and kids ran off to play or go home, Jake went somewhere else. He didn't tell anybody, not his mom, not his teachers, not even his best friend Sam, who was nice but didn't ask too many questions. Jake would grab his backpack, slip out the school doors, and head across town. He walked past houses with kids riding bikes, past the park where dogs barked, past the diner where his mom poured coffee. He kept going until he reached a place nobody at school knew about. It wasn't a fancy place. It was old, with creaky doors and walls that smelled like dust, but to Jake it was special. Inside that place, he wasn't the kid who stuttered. He wasn't the boy Tommy tripped or laughed at. He was someone else, someone strong, someone who didn't need words to show what he could do. Every day he went there, and every day he got a little tougher, a little braver. Tommy thought he knew everything about Jake. He thought Jake was weak, an easy target, but Tommy was wrong, so wrong, and soon he'd find out just how wrong he was. Weeks went by at Maplewood Middle School and things didn't get better for Jake Miller. In fact, they got worse. Tommy Baxter, the big bully with spiky blonde hair, wasn't happy just picking on Jake in the hallways or gym anymore. He wanted everyone to join in, so he started spreading rumors, mean ones. He'd walk around the school telling kids that Jake was too scared to talk because he was dumb. He'd say it loud with a smirk, making sure Jake could hear. At first, only Tommy's buddies laughed, but soon other kids started believing it. Kids who used to ignore Jake, who didn't care one way or another, began whispering behind his back. "Did you hear about Jake?" they'd say. "Tommy says he's slow." In the lunchroom, Jake could feel their eyes on him. He'd sit alone with his tray, eating his sandwich, pretending he didn't notice. But he did. Every whisper felt like a little pinch in his chest. Even some teachers acted different. Jake saw it in their faces. When he raised his hand in class, they'd give him this sad, pitying look like they thought he'd never be more than the kid who couldn't talk right. One time in math, Jake tried to answer a question about fractions. His voice stumbled, like always. TT12, he said, and the room went quiet. The teacher, Mrs. Green, nodded slowly. Good try, Jake, she said, but her voice was soft, like she felt sorry for him. Jake hated that. He wasn't dumb, he knew the answer, he just couldn't say it fast. But Jake, he didn't break, he didn't cry or give up. Instead, he got quieter at school. He stopped trying to talk in class. He stopped looking kids in the eye. He'd walk through the hallways with his head down, his glasses slipping, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. To everyone else, it looked like Jake was shrinking, like Tommy was winning. But that wasn't the whole story, not even close. While school felt like a storm, Jake had a secret. Every afternoon when the final bell rang, he didn't go home to play video games or watch TV. Nope, he grabbed his backpack and walked across town to an old building far from school. It wasn't a shiny place like the sports center where rich kids played basketball. This was different. It was a boxing gym, old and worn out. The floors creaked when you stepped on them. The air smelled like sweat and leather. Punching bags hung from the ceiling, some with duct tape holding them together. The gym was run by a man named Mr. Carter. He was old, with gray hair and a scar above one eye that made him look tough. Mr. Carter wasn't soft or cuddly. He didn't smile much and his voice was rough like gravel, but he was kind in his own way. He'd known Jake's dad, who died when Jake was little. When Jake showed up at the gym one day asking to learn, Mr. Carter didn't laugh or tell him to go home. He looked at Jake, nodded, and said, "Let's see what you've got, kid." Mr. Carter saw something in Jake that nobody at school did. Maybe it was the way Jake didn't complain even when he was tired. Maybe it was the fire in his eyes, the same fire that burned when Tommy was mean. Whatever it was, Mr. Carter believed in him. One day he tossed Jake a pair of red boxing gloves. They were heavy and a little beat up. "Words don't win fights, kid," Mr. Carter said, his voice serious. "Heart does." Jake took those words and held them tight. At the gym, he trained hard, really hard. He'd punch the heavy bags until his knuckles felt sore. Bam, 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 the sound echoed through the gym. He'd jump rope, his feet moving so fast they blurred, even though his legs burned like they were on fire. Sometimes Mr. Carter would have him spar with other kids, practice fighting in the ring. Jake wasn't big, but he was quick. He'd duck and dodge, moving like a shadow. When he threw a punch, it was sharp and strong, like a bee sting. The ring, Jake's stutter didn't matter. Nobody cared if his words got stuck. His fists did the talking. Every jab, every hook said something loud and clear. Jake was tough. Jake was brave. Jake was more than the kid Tommy laughed at. The other boxers at the gym, some older, some younger, started to respect him. They'd nod when he walked in like he belonged. One kid, a tall boy named Leo, even high-fived him after a good spar. "Nice moves, Jake," Leo said. Jake smiled, his chest feeling warm. Back at school, though, nobody knew. Jake kept it secret. He didn't tell his mom, who was always tired from work. He didn't tell his best friend Sam, who liked comic books but didn't know much about sports. He didn't tell anyone. It was his thing, his place to be strong. But every day at the gym, Jake felt a little bigger inside, like he was building something nobody could break. One afternoon, Jake was in the school courtyard eating an apple during break. He liked the courtyard because it was quieter than the cafeteria. He was sitting on a bench minding his own business when he heard Tommy's voice. Tommy was with his crew as usual, standing near the basketball hoop. They were loud, tossing a ball around, showing off. Jake tried to ignore them, but then he heard something that made his ears perk up. "There's gonna be a big talent show," Tommy was saying, flexing his arms like he was a superhero. "It's not just singing and dancing either. They're doing a boxing thing to raise money for the school. I'm signing up. I'll knock out anyone dumb enough to step in the ring with me." Tommy's friends cheered, slapping his back. "You're gonna crush it, Tommy," one said. Tommy grinned, throwing fake punches in the air. "Nobody's tougher than me," he bragged. "I'll show this whole school who's boss." Jake sat still, his apple half-eaten in his hand. His heart started pounding like a drum in his chest. He didn't move, he didn't say a word, but something happened inside him. That fire, the one that burned when Tommy was mean, it flared up, brighter than ever. Jake's lips twitched. A tiny smile crept across his face, so small nobody noticed. Tommy kept talking, boasting about how nobody could beat him. Kids around him nodded like he was unstoppable. But Jake, he knew something they didn't. He wasn't just the quiet kid anymore. He wasn't just the boy with a stutter. He was the boy who trained every day, who punched bags until his arms ached, who moved like lightning in the ring. What was Jake thinking? What was he planning? "Oh, you're gonna want to see this." Tommy thought he had it all figured out, but Jake was about to surprise everyone. The night of the Maplewood Middle School talent show was electric. The gym was stuffed with people, kids, parents, teachers, even some grandparents. They sat on bleachers, squished together, chattering like a flock of birds. The air smelled like popcorn and sweat. Bright lights shone down on the stage, where kids had already sung songs, danced, and juggled. But now everyone was waiting for something special, the boxing exhibition. It was the big finale, a chance to raise money for new school books. Tommy Baxter was acting like a king. He strutted around the gym in shiny red boxing gloves, his spiky blonde hair bouncing. His friends trailed behind, cheering and clapping like he was a movie star. Tommy loved the attention. He'd flex his arms, throw fake punches in the air, and grin at the crowd. "Who's gonna challenge me?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Nobody got the guts. His buddies whooped, and some kids in the bleachers clapped, thinking Tommy was unbeatable. The gym was loud, buzzing with excitement. Everyone knew Tommy was big and strong. He'd been bragging for weeks about how he'd win the boxing match easy. Kids whispered to each other, saying nobody would dare step into the ring with him. Tommy soaked it all up, his smile wide, his eyes gleaming. He was sure he'd be the hero tonight. Then the announcer grabbed the microphone. He was Mr. Thompson, the gym teacher, with a big voice that boomed through the speakers. "Next up for the boxing exhibition," he said, pausing for effect, "Jake Miller." The gym went quiet, like pin drop quiet. You could hear someone's sneaker squeak on the floor. Kids looked at each other, confused. Parents raised their eyebrows. Teachers leaned forward, squinting. Tommy froze for a second, then burst out laughing. His laugh was loud and mean, cutting through the silence. Jake," he said, copying Jake's stutter. Seriously, this is gonna be over in 10 seconds. His friends cracked up, slapping their knee. Some kids in the crowd giggled, thinking Tommy was right. Jake, the quiet kid who couldn't talk right, no way he could box. But then Jake Miller stepped into the ring. He wasn't running or hiding. He wasn't looking at the floor like he usually did at school. Jake walked out slow and steady, his red boxing gloves laced up tight. His glasses were gone, left in the locker room probably, and his messy brown hair was pushed back under a headguard. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't blushing. He looked calm, too calm, like he knew something nobody else did. The crowd started whispering, "Is that really Jake?" One kid said. "He looks different," another whispered. Tommy's smirk wobbled for a split second, like he saw something weird in Jake's eyes, but he shook it off fast. "You're toast, JJ Jake," he yelled, bouncing on his toes. He turned to his friends and winked like it was all a big joke. The referee, a tall man with a whistle, called both boys to the center of the ring. He told them the rules: keep it clean, listen to him,